Hello, it is Wednesday, August 21st. I'm Andy Behrens, clearly. Welcome to the Yahoo Fantasy Forecast. It is a hell of a day to talk ball, and you're joining us on a really good day because I've got the great Tera Roberts with me. Tera, welcome. We're in the same space. That's kind of cool.
Wonderful.
It's kind of fun.
And I'm in California, so it's even better. Much better than Texas.
Wow. Unexpected dislike for Texas there, but I guess Texas summer's a little
painful.
A little rough.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, this has been good. We're getting together here. We're doing it live in the same space because it's Convictions Week, and we got important stuff to talk about. First, though, a friendly reminder. It is a friendly reminder. Sign up for a Yahoo Fantasy Football League right now if you haven't already. Why? Because Yahoo Sports and NBC are teaming up for a $1 million sweepstakes. Somebody who signs up for a private league on Yahoo is going to win $1 million. It might as well be you. That can definitely happen. For details, go to yahoo.com/fantasymillion. Later in the show, we're going to have a fantasy mailbag. Drop your emails, voice notes, video messages, any type of means of contact. Hit us up at fantasymailbag@yahoosports.com. But that's much later. Again, I mentioned Convictions Week, and we started that off earlier with Bus for 2024. Be sure to check that pod out. It was done with Matt Harmon, Dan Titus, if you haven't listened to it already. But they're very negative people. They tend toward negativity. They are not full of the sort of sunshine and positivity that Tera and I bring on basically a daily basis. So today we're going to talk about breakouts. We're going to talk about guys that are actually ascending, guys that, maybe they're rookies, maybe they're early in their career, but we expect something big from them this season. And I shouldn't need to remind you that last year, you look at a breakouts list from 2023. These guys were league winners, right? Think about Jordan Love. You're a Packers person. Jordan Love, you probably had a little bit in the fantasy portfolio. Kyron Williams, Puka Nacua, Sam Laporta, to some extent Dalton Kincaid, Trey McBride, Nico Collins. These guys, if they weren't league winners, man, they were pretty decisive in fantasy, right?
Yeah.
Who were your big success stories from last year? I feel like Collins we could see coming.
Oh, yeah.
There's always going to be cases where we weren't going to talk about Puka Nacua on this version of the breakout show last year. He was more off the radar, but there were some stories that you could see coming that we did highlight.
I feel like even though we saw them coming, sometimes we got a lot of pushback on them, like with Nico Collins, because it was a weird situation of a guy. It's easy to convince people on the rookie breakouts because that's the ones that everyone's so excited about. But when you're talking about a guy like Nico Collins last year that had had multiple years of no success, a lot of skepticism in terms of how the Texans were going to be, what kind of player was CJ Stroud going to be, sometimes you got a little bit of pushback, people that weren't true believers in Nico Collins.
It's almost hard to remember right now that there was a time when we had zero expectations for CJ Stroud, right? Now he's like
crazy
top 5, top 6 quarterback. We all agree on him. But 12 months ago, why is he going to be any different than Davis Mills, right? Why wouldn't I just get the usual 500-yard season from Nico Collins? It's a great point. It is not going to surprise anybody who has listened to this podcast in the recent past that we are doing this via secret list because that's my thing. I love a secret list. I hate to see names in the doc. I don't want to know who you're going to talk about. So we're just going to go back and forth, and we're gonna bounce breakouts off of each other. I'm going to let you go first here. Let's mix up the positions. I don't want 5 straight receivers. I don't want 5 straight running backs. Let's mix it up a little bit. Give me your first name. This doesn't have to be the name that you're most convicted about, but give me somebody you feel really strongly about.
Oh, but it is. It is the one that I am most convicted about. I feel I didn't start off wanting to be the resident Drake London truther. It's just how it turned out. And so we're sticking to our guns on this one. It's Drake London, the breakout here. I don't know if technically I'm cheating in terms of breakout because can you call a guy a breakout that is being drafted within the first 3 rounds? Second round, if you're looking at my rankings. But when it comes to Drake London, I consider him a breakout because we look at the past 2 years, and that's the immediate pushback that I get from everybody. Why is he going to break out now? He hasn't done anything. We're talking about a guy that has had less than 1,000 yards in every single season, a total of 6 touchdowns overall. It's been, it's not even at a Garrett Wilson level where the targets are there and you feel confident around it and say, I just need a quarterback that's going to get there and make the targets accurate. I feel like people don't know what to expect with Drake London, but I am 100% in on this breakout because I feel like all he needs is Kirk Cousins to just get in there and bring consistency to the offense. I know there's some skepticism around a guy coming out, older, coming off an Achilles injury, but we're also talking about comparing Kirk Cousins to guys like Desmond Ridder, Marcus Mariota, Taylor Heineke. This is the most significant upgrade that a quarterback could get. So I'm okay with leaning into Drake London, taking him high. We're drafting him in his ceiling theoretically, but I do think top 5 is actually well in the range of outcomes for him if everything goes perfectly for the Falcons. Easy schedule, great division. There's a lot of upside here.
I'm glad you framed it that way because I don't think we're completely drafting him at his ceiling, right?
Exactly.
And I'm also glad that you introduced the name Garrett Wilson because for a while there was a disconnect between what we were doing with Garrett Wilson in drafts and what we were doing with Drake London, right? And I just feel like their situations are almost identical.
Exactly.
Abysmal quarterbacking situations, particularly last year, right? Obviously, on the Jets side, we had not just Zach Wilson, but we had Simeon. We had it was a terrible quarterback situation, and we had Heineke and Ridder, which it didn't get much worse than that in Atlanta. They are both huge talents, and I think kind of screaming talents where it's pretty obvious, and we just need the right quarterback in there to make it good. And for a while there was around 2 rounds of difference between Drake London and Garrett Wilson. I think the world of Garrett Wilson, but I don't think there's that much difference between these two players. And I also think both of them are in situations where they're going to be the number one. I can't, I guess you can make a case that Kyle Pitts can be like a 1A, a strong number 2, but I think they're both clearly the number 1 on their teams. And it's, they both have pretty clean paths to like 150 targets this year.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. I mean, I love Darnell Mooney, fantastic wide receiver too, but not somebody that is going to push on Drake London for this. So it's, clear target, clear number 1.
Okay, I'm going to give you the first name on my list. I'll go away from the receiver position, and I've had this conversation a lot with Matt Harmon, so I am interested in bouncing it off somebody else to see what you think, because Harmon usually just kind of nods along with me, and we'll see, maybe I'll get a little pushback here, but I think Trevor Lawrence is a really interesting name to talk about because he has been, and this is maybe it's cheating because he broke out, right? Like he broke out in college, first of all. Like nobody is unaware of Trevor Lawrence. He had a great collegiate career. And then 2 years ago, he actually leads the Jags to a playoff win. It's a great season, 4,100 yards, really limits his turnovers, and finishes as like a top 8 fantasy quarterback. So you can argue that he broke out already, but I feel like last season really reset that. And I feel like a lot of it wasn't on him. Surely a bunch of it was double-digit interceptions. The tape is not all flattering for Trevor Lawrence. I will admit that, but I also think that almost no one else in recent memory, and certainly not last year, was victimized by the kind of crushing. And it's not like the Jaguars were at the top of the league in drops necessarily, depending on who you reference. But man, where the drops occurred. When the drops occurred, like the number of end zone drops that they had, or near touchdowns that they had, or like double catches where a guy doesn't get both feet in bounds and it's like a college touchdown, but not an NFL, they had so many of those plays last year. And I still think that Trevor Lawrence made so many gorgeous throws. He's got a huge arm. And I actually like for a team that lost Calvin Ridley, for a team that actually lost, its highest volume receiver, I love the way their receiving core shakes out. We all know what Gabe Davis is. They still got Christian Kirk. They still got Evan Ingram. Those guys were great last year. I love the rookie Brian Thomas. I absolutely love him. First round rookie, who is so perfectly paired with what Trevor Lawrence does well that I can't really imagine a scenario where if they're both healthy, I can't imagine this not going really well, right? Great vertical threat. And whatever you think about Trevor Lawrence coming off of last season, he's one of the best deep ball throwers in the game. And the numbers illustrate that. Like from the moment he entered the league, he's been one of the best deep ball throwers. So I just think they put together a complementary set of receivers that are going to be great. I think we've already seen him as a very good player. Also, by the way, I mean, it feels like he's been in our lives for a decade. He's a year older than Jaden Daniels. He's 24 years old. Like, he's not, we're not deep into Trevor Lawrence's career. He's still a very young player who's still ascending. So, I don't know. You have thoughts on Trevor? Do you hate that?
I love Trevor.
Okay. Oh,
yeah, Clemson grad.
Clemson. I should have known I had a friendly audience here. Yeah,
I should be like a secondary Jags fan at this point with the way they love Clemson. You mentioned the playoff game, and that being like the push to hype into the next season.
It was half a bad game and half a really good game.
It was such a crazy comeback, right? And it carried into that. And I was in last season. I thought, okay, that's, we've got, even not just the playoff game, like just the end of the season, he was pushing forward. It looked like things were turning around and they were getting comfortable with Doug Peterson. And my problem was it was like a repeat. Like, I felt like I was going through the exact same season. But you mentioned, like, you gave some good arguments as to why it ended up and where it wasn't really Trevor Lawrence's fault. So I can lean into it, especially since we had the ADP drop. I do like the surrounding receiving core that they've got as well. Exit of Calvin Ridley is a bummer, but they're very balanced, right? You've got Travis Etienne. The run game is strong. You've got these wide receivers. You've got one of the better tight ends in the league. So I can lean into it. I want to see that progress and him push forward, but I don't think that at his ADP there's an issue with him.
Yeah, that's the really nice thing, is that anybody who was on him last year is running away from him this year. So there's not a lot of competition for him. The other thing I should probably say, and I feel like this is a little bit of cheating because he was already disappointing people in the first half of the season. I get that. But he did have a high ankle sprain later in the year, played through it. And oftentimes that's just one of those things where, like, a player gets all sorts of credit within the locker room for playing through an injury, but fantasy managers hate it because they don't give you any credit for playing hurt, right?
Mm-hmm.
They just want to see the numbers at the end of the day. And I feel like a lot of people really bailed on him when he was struggling, just health wise, mobility wise, later in the year. Okay, that's enough of my Trevor Lawrence propaganda. Give me your second name.
I'll keep us on the Trevor Lawrence propaganda. I'll go back to wide receiver, but we'll go to Brian Thomas here.
Yeah.
Stay on this Jaguars trend. This is an interesting one because this is the exact opposite of Drake London for me. I've had the conviction on this one for since the second we've got the rumors of Kirk Cousins to Atlanta. But with Brian Thomas, I've had to be kind of talked into this one because I was a little skeptical, right, of the college. Was the college career what it really was? Are we getting Terrace Marshall 2.0 here? Getting a little worried about that. Like, looking at the stats and you're like, okay, I don't feel like it's a lock in the same way that we felt about some of those other first round talents. But the more I look at him in this offense and him being that 1-for-1 replacement of Ridley, and looking at their preseason and the way that they've been utilizing the receivers, now I'm getting a little bit worried about Christian Kirk.
Mm-hmm.
We're looking back to that season and saying, was he the beneficiary of all of the injuries that happened to Zay Jones? And it just kind of pushed him a little bit further up. And then he was kind of the target hog in the offense. Now, if this entire receiving core, the way that it is, we've got Gabe Davis, Brian Thomas, and Christian Kirk, is he going to be the one that's kind of left out because he hasn't been playing on those two receiver sets, unfortunately?
Yeah.
And if this is the issue with him, I get a little bit concerned. So when I'm looking at Brian Thomas, I'm looking at him and I'm thinking there's a real possibility that maybe behind Evan Ingram, who might be the sneakiest, target hog in this offense, that Brian Thomas could be the one that is the most reliable receiver for Trevor Lawrence. He's looked fantastic. I like what I saw in the preseason games. And the more that I look at it, the more I lean into it and I look at the ADP and I start to get very comfortable with him potentially being one of the more successful rookie breakouts of the season.
He's definitely got some helium because he's one of these, like, just daily highlights are hitting the social feed, right? And that's obviously a good thing because clearly the game isn't too fast for him. He's clicking with Trevor Lawrence, but literally we're getting a highlight play in the Twitter feed every single day. It hasn't his ADP hasn't exploded.
Yeah.
Like we don't have to draft him yet in the same neighborhood as like other first round rookie wide receivers, right? He's not in Neighbors territory just yet. He's certainly not in Marvin Harrison Jr. territory just yet. This is one of the best athletes in the draft too. Like this is one of those guys who, even by the standards of his position in the NFL, 6'4", 4.3 speed, nearly a 40-inch vertical. They don't make a lot of guys like this. And it was reflected in the college production last year. And again, like I can't underscore the point enough. He is so perfectly paired with Trevor Lawrence. And I don't mean to package Brian Thomas Jr. as somebody who can only be a deep threat, but like, my God, the vertical shots are going to be awesome. And there's going to be like 6 of them that are among the best plays of the year for the Jags. And this is something that, like, again, whatever else you think about Trevor Lawrence, he can chuck the ball 65 yards and hit somebody. Like he's got a huge arm. So I love this call. Absolutely love this call. I'm going to give my second name here. And this is, again, man, now that I really consider the names that I selected for this, I might be cheating here as well, because you could argue that Zamir White broke out in the final 4 games last year. It wasn't over a full season, right? It was once Josh Jacobs tapped out and had the injury that sent him to the sideline. Zamir White, kind of quietly, because it's not like he was scoring 2 touchdowns a week, but you look at his final 4 games when he got the full workload for the Raiders, 114 scrimmage yards per week, 22 touches per week. So there's not a lot of guys that are getting 20 plus touches per week regularly, and it's bankable. But that was him. We know they're going to lean on him. Am I concerned that Gardner Minshew is his quarterback and that Aiden O'Connell is plan B if and when Gardner Minshew doesn't work? Of course I'm concerned. Like, this is a team that could average, I don't know, 13, 14 points a game. Like the floor for this team is very low. I do worry about that. But there are maybe a half dozen guys in the league that I would comfortably project for over 18 touches per game, right? It's just not that we're not managing fantasy teams in 1995 anymore, and there's not a whole lot of those guys to go around. Zamir White, I'm pretty comfortable, is one of those guys. He was also, and this is, small sample size and all that, but he was one of the best rushers in terms of yards after contact last year. It was like 3.2 yards after contact per attempt. So there's some under the hood stuff that is really encouraging here. Again, I also think the fact that the offense is probably not going to be that dynamic, I think that's kind of baked into the price. Like, he's not a guy that you need to take among the top 20 running backs, and he's going to have a workload that is just not at all in sync with where you have to take him. Are you in or out on Zamir? How you feel about him?
I'm in. I tell people, exercise caution, right? With the small sample size running backs. It's ironic that he has Alexander Mattison as his backup, because that was the small sample size bust of 2023. And now he's there with Zamir White. So be cautious, but I agree with you that I don't hate this. I don't hate the Raiders offense for a running back, for the fact that I think their defense is good enough to where they're not going to be scripted out of games. That is what makes me feel more comfortable about Zamir White. Because we've gotten all this hype around like Dylan Lobby, and he's going to be the third down back, and Zamir White can't catch. And it's not that Zamir White can't catch. He doesn't have brick hands. This is not a situation of where every single time on third downs they're going to remove him. He can catch. Similar to Josh Jacobs. Josh Jacobs isn't known as a prolific pass catcher, but he still gets volume in receiving that made him successful in that Raiders offense. And I think that Zamir White can do the exact same thing. Just get enough, right? And then you get the goal line opportunities. The games will be close enough. You're not going to be scripted out. So I feel comfortable with him. The ADP you mentioned, perfectly fine. I don't feel like there's a reason to avoid him. Just depends on how you want to build your roster.
Yeah, it's such a good point about the defense too. I mean, I really think the identity of that team is going to be we're gonna try to hold you to 17 points, and we're gonna try to get there somehow, and we're gonna feed Zamir White probably 20 touches per game. I like that call a lot. Okay, we're gonna regroup a little bit. We're gonna take a quick break, and then we're gonna continue our breakout list with guys later in drafts who can certainly help you. All right, we are back. We have each discussed 2 breakout candidates so far. We're working from secret lists because I'm on the podcast, and that's my mandate. So, Tera, give me your third breakout candidate for 2024.
I'm going to take us to quarterback, and I'm going to talk about the ever rising ADP of Jaden Daniels. It's weird to always say breakouts for rookies because they're rookies. Whatever they do is whatever they do. But and the ADP is rising. But when you look at Jaden Daniels, I just get so excited about the potential of what he can be in the NFL. There was never, as we were going through all the draft drama and is JJ McCarthy pushing up? Do you want to take Drake May? Is he going to be? I was always very much so, no, the Commanders are taking Jaden Daniels. This is perfect for them. I cannot wait to pair him up with Cliff Kingsbury. I can't wait to pair him up with this receiving core. I know we've had some drama in terms of who's going to be the wide receiver two there, but I think they've got good depth. It's good to see other people stepping up. They've added to the tight end position. The running backs are fantastic. So overall, I mean, when I look at this team, do I think that they're going to make a playoff run and just, have that kind of Houston trajectory? I don't know about that. But from a fantasy perspective, Jaden Daniels has everything that we need for him to be that what we thought Anthony Richardson was going to be last year to justify a potential top 5 upside for this guy. And when you're looking at Jaden Daniels and making that leap on his ADP that's rising, and he's probably going to be a guy that you're going to have to draft as a top 12 quarterback. The thing about it is that I don't feel very scared. In the past, drafting these progressive rookies that are getting pushed up in ADP makes me a little bit nervous, right? Because you're making that investment into this guy and what's going to happen if he gets injured or he's a bust and something goes wrong. But I'm looking at the quarterbacks after him, and depth is just so extreme. I think that you can take a lot of risk on rookies or unproven quarterbacks this year because there's not a lot of worry when you can hit the waiver wire and say, okay, I'm going to hit the waiver wire and grab Geno Smith. I can hit the waiver wire and grab Matt Stafford. I can draft, pair up with a guy, Trevor Lawrence is going later. We can pair him up with Jaden Daniels, and you've got something that you cannot feel like your fantasy season is going to be a bust if Jaden Daniels doesn't achieve what we think he's going to be able to achieve. So I'm leaning into it. I feel comfortable with it. I think the breakout potential for him is just so extreme with the big arm, the rushing upside, just everything seems like it's aligning.
Yeah, this is, you made a great point there. That is the point that I often like to make when we talk about these like flyers that we take at the quarterback position. Most fantasy leagues, we do a lot of talking in fantasy circles and industry circles about Superflex, but that is not what most people play. Most people are not out there playing leagues in which you have to start 2 quarterbacks. So like replacement value at this position is so high. Like, I don't know, I talked about Trevor Lawrence earlier. There's going to be a ton of leagues in which he goes undrafted and he's just sitting out there. You play in a one, like most, 90 some percent of fantasy leagues, probably 1 quarterback, 10 teams, 12 teams. The waiver wire is full of guys who are super useful. The waiver wire is going to be like last year, you could have plucked Jordan Love off the wire. You would have plucked CJ Stroud off the wire. Like these guys are available. So it is a position where you like, if there's one spot where you should be taking huge swings, this is it. And another, I talk up Caleb Williams all the time. I'm gonna not do it on this pod because people have heard me extol his virtues previously. But I will say, like, one of the strongest arguments for Caleb is, man, for a quarterback drafted that high, he's certainly stepping into a really ripe situation, right? All these great receivers. Well, it's the same is pretty true of Jaden Daniels. It's not quite the same. Like we don't have 3 guys in the receiving core that we're just dead on certain about, but Terry McLaurin's great. And, Dotson at his best, really good. Like they've got some dudes there. Like Austin Eckler's caught a zillion balls over the course of his career. Like there are short range options. There's deep options there. Like he's got some stuff to work with. The one question I want to ask you about Daniels, and again, I just take big swings at quarterback, so I like this call. One of the negatives on the scouting report, and people have seen the Twitter memes and some of the tape of him just getting rocked last year. Like it became a joke, but it's actually not a joke. Like it really did happen. Like there is an aspect to his game where like he's got to get down sometimes. Like some people are like Lamar Jackson is the absolute master of this. You never see him take like some huge shot. Jaden Daniels has got to get that because in the NFL, when they blow you up, that's how his season goes wrong. I feel so. I don't know a little bit like how do you weigh that risk?
It's a risk, honestly. And it happens with bigger quarterbacks too. We saw Anthony Richardson get rocked into season last year. I'm hoping. I'm looking at Cliff Kingsbury, and I'm saying you've got experience with Kyler. You know how to handle this type of situation. Can you coach it into Jaden Daniels and make it go away? Granted, they're two completely different body types, but can you make sure that you figure out ways to protect him? And I feel like that's going to happen. I don't know if we've seen a lot of it in preseason. They're being cautious and whatnot, but
well, the ball is coming out quick in preseason, and that's I guess that's my other question for you. Do you think what we're seeing in the preseason is this horizontal raid stuff is just an accurate reflection of what we're going to see in the regular season too? Because the ball is coming out so fast.
Yeah, and I feel like sometimes what we see in the preseason isn't exactly what they're going to do throughout the season, but I feel like it's pretty accurate. I'm trusting it, and I'm feeling like we don't have to put a massive fear into the possibility. So I'm okay with it.
Okay, I'm going to give you my third breakout here, and this is a guy that I talked about a little bit on the tight end podcast that Harmon and I did a week ago. I just want to bring up Dalton Kincaid because this is like my first guy who hasn't actually broken out yet in any way. Like, he had a nice rookie season, but it wasn't a difference-making rookie season by any stretch. I feel like Dalton Kincaid, and we talked about, again, Matt and I talked about this in the tight end pod. I feel like there's this decision point in drafts where Kincaid is on the board, Kittle is on the board, Kyle Pitts is on the board. And I can tell you a story about each of those guys and what it looks like if they were to finish as the tight end 1 overall, the tight end 3 overall. Like, I think each of them has a path. Kincaid is always where I go, because I can really see the volume in Kincaid. Like, I'm going to be shocked if Dalton Kincaid doesn't see 125 targets this year, 130 targets this year. We know about all the vacated targets in the offense, right? It's like 240 plus between Gabe Davis and Stephon Diggs. Kincaid had emerged as such a little cheat code player for Josh Allen last year, an easy button player. Caught over 80% of his targets. I do think that Dawson Knox is going to be a thing. I don't think he goes away entirely. I think they have one of the most interesting receiving cores in the league. Harmon and I talked about this as well, where everybody looks like a slot receiver to me, and that can't work. But I think Kincaid's going to be on the field all the time. One of the things I like about him most for fantasy purposes is he's not burdened with any of the traditional tight end responsibilities, right? We're not running behind Dalton Kincaid on the goal line a whole lot. There are no pass blocking snaps for Dalton Kincaid, basically. Like, he's running routes all of the time when he's out on the field. And I just think Allen kind of fell in love with him last year. So I think there's a really easy path here to 130 targets, which might lead the position in any given year. And we get a little bit of touchdown luck. And I think there's a real path for Dalton Kincaid to finish as the tight end 1. Oh, you hate this call.
This will be the first time.
This is the value of being in the same room together, because I can immediately see, this is a terrible call, Andy.
This is the first time we'll disagree today. It's weird because I have Dalton Kincaid ranked as my tight end 5, and I feel good about that. Like, I feel I'm not coming off of that, but the problem is that I feel like
you like 6 and 7 just as well.
Yeah. And I feel like I've got that aggressive tier break right there before him. And then the guys you mentioned, the Kyle Pitts and George Kittle, and I throw even Evan Ingram in there. I feel super comfortable with them having similar range of outcomes, maybe not target wise, but just overall fantasy production. And I do get kind of concerned about the level of unknown with this receiving core, where it's entirely possible. Like, I like Khalil Shakir as a breakout from this team, but at the same time, it's entirely possible that Keon Coleman breaks out and also has a fantastic and becomes a target hog and deep threat in this offense and touchdown guy. I feel like there's just so many directions that this offense could go, and I'm looking at the guy that I would be taking from that offense first. He's got the highest ADP between all of the receivers, and I feel like it's justified. But at the same time, I prefer to go another direction and then take my stabs at that receiving core, because the ADP is just so beautiful for all of them. If they break out, I feel like I'm getting true value there. Whereas with Dalton Kincaid, I feel like I'm getting the exact same value from several guys after.
Yeah, I feel like there's going to be a right answer for sure in the Buffalo receiving corps. There might be two right answers. I'm not sure. I would love it if one of them was Keon Coleman, because like you just talk about a star personality. I would love it if he became a star. I'm probably a little bit more down on him than I am the rest of them. I love the call on Shakir. Shakir was so good last year. He was like sneaky good, sneaky efficient, tremendous down the stretch. But I do still think Dalton Kincaid is going to be a thing, and it's really the number of available targets that gets me. So that's fine. We can agree to disagree. Give me what number are we on? Are we on your fourth breakout candidate? Give me your fourth breakout.
I've lost count. I'm not a great counter. Let's go with Tajay Spears. As
this is the first name. This is the first name from my list.
Is it? Yeah.
So okay, I'll pivot. I'll find somebody else. But I obviously love this call. Go ahead.
Tajay Spears. When I look at this Titans backfield, I was so hype on another level when Derrick Henry. I was hyped for Derrick Henry going to the Ravens. That excited me. Him in that offense. But I was hyped to thinking that Tajay Spears was finally going to get his opportunity and he was going to step in and he's 3-down capable and he just looked fantastic playing alongside Derrick Henry and thinking he can step into that role. They don't need another similar back the way that Tony Pollard and him profile so similarly. But I don't hate it because I do think that this backfield, he has the opportunity to shine within it. I'm pushing he's up in my rankings. I'm still comfortable with Tony Pollard. But when I look at this offense for the Titans as a whole, I think it's one of these offenses where we're going to be surprised. We've got Will Levis in his second year. We look at him and we know that the potential there is a little bit high for him in this offense. He's got decent weapons around him. Hopefully we get DeAndre Hopkins back from that injury. The run game, 2 solid running backs, very good pass catchers. I look at it and I feel like we're going to have a bunch of guys overperform their ADP. And it feels uncomfortable to say it because I don't think a lot of people want to lean into the Titans offense just because it's the Titans offense and it's Will Levis and it's the Mayo and everything is just kind of like funny and we don't want to take it seriously. But when I look at Tajay Spears and the way that he was last year, he was electric. He was elusive. The yards per carry were absolutely insane, even through, the Titans offensive line was arguably a major issue, but they upgraded it. Yeah. I feel like the Titans went out and solved all the issues that they needed to solve. They upgraded the defense. The line is so much better. The receiving core is solid. I don't see a ton of downside, and the ADPs are appropriate for all of these guys. So while I like Tony Pollard in this offense as well, I think it's very easy for Tajay Spears to just outshine him and earn the bulk of the carries there. And the upside will be there in that offense. Maybe the goal line opportunities will be higher as well. And we could really see that surprise breakout season from Tajay Spears.
Yeah, I like the framing of this offense potentially being like the breakout surprise offense of 2024, right? Because again, we talked about it a little while ago. Nobody saw the Texans coming. Yeah. Like this does happen every year. And it's, it's hard to predict it in advance. If we were great about predicting the breakout offense in advance, then we wouldn't all have been so down on the Texans last year. But like this does happen fairly consistently. You think of the Seahawks the year before in the season that Geno Smith had, like stuff like that happens. This team has done a lot to support its young quarterback. We like that. Specific to Spears, that guy saw over 50% of the snaps last year when Derrick Henry was his partner in the backfield. So like his playing time isn't going away with Tony Pollard in the Derrick Henry role, right? I like that. I think it was 5.5 yards per touch last year. He had maybe the quietest 50 catch season for a running back last year. So like any sort of PPR format, you're going to love him as a flex with the potential to be something much more than that. So yeah, I really like this call a lot. I'm gonna move to my fourth. I think it's my fourth. I'm gonna go with Zay Flowers, and Zay Flowers to me is one of those guys. Again, I'm picking somebody who already like half broke out. The last taste that we got of Zay Flowers, not great, right? Like he helped them lose a playoff game that was pretty winnable. But one of the nice things about Flowers is where he's sort of priced right now in terms of ADP. He's outside the top 20. So if he just runs it back, if we just get the Zay Flowers season from a year ago, we're talking about a guy who's pushing 80 catches. I think he missed a game. If he plays that game, he's over 80 catches. He finished with over 900 scrimmage yards. Really fun season. Not a difference-making fantasy season, but really fun. If he just does that at the price we're currently paying, it's fine. If they expand his role, if they ask more of a guy who might be the number one target in the offense, right? I feel like he and Mark Andrews are like 1 and 1A in some way in the Ravens passing hierarchy. If they just ask him to get deep a little bit more, which was an absolute strength of his at the college level. Like you think about like the splash plays that you saw from Zay Flowers as a prospect, they were vertical shots a lot of the time. He had one of the lowest ADOTs in the league last year. He was at the line of scrimmage, just beyond the line of scrimmage guy. It was like 8.8 average depth per target for him. If we get him deep occasionally with Lamar's arm, he's tied to an MVP quarterback, a 2-time MVP quarterback. And this is, these are not the Ravens of like 5 years ago. These are not the Greg Roman. They're going to throw. They're going to throw the ball a lot. They just did it last year. If we get some more shot plays to Zay Flowers, I think we have the potential for him to go from 900 scrimmage yards to like 1,200. I think this is a guy who can go from like 77 catches to 90 plus, maybe challenge 100. If they use him the way that they did last year and he plays the full season. And even if we don't get all these vertical shots that I'm talking about, I still think there's a path for him to eclipse 90 catches, which obviously that's super valuable in any fantasy format. So I don't know. Are you taking him? Are you like all in on Zay Flowers? Are you all out on this?
I'm taking him. It's a weird range because there's so many options at receiver where he's going. But I feel like you mentioned like this isn't the Greg Roman offense of the past. But what I find funny is that even back then, I feel like people always underestimated that the targets were really centrally located in theory, with, Mark Andrews and Marquise Brown. Mm-hmm. The problem is that he just couldn't stay healthy. He never played a complete season. But when he was out there, when he was active, he was performing as a wide receiver one. The output from a fantasy perspective was excellent. It just never looked like it in the overall perspective because he could never play a full season. And there were, injury issues with Lamar, but we haven't had to deal with that recently. So when I look at Zay Flowers being the 1B to Mark Andrews, I think it's entirely possible that the Ravens offense can produce a top 12 receiver, maybe even a little bit higher if they have that consistency throughout the season. And Zay Flowers is the kind of guy that can do that. So I'm 100% with you. I know we've got some Rashad Bateman truthers on in Yahoo.
Yeah, well, one of them frequently hosts this podcast.
But I lean into Zay Flowers, love him as a player, and I agree. I think it's going to be really centrally located between those two, and I feel so comfortable with him and Mark Andrews.
All right, give me your fifth and final breakout.
My fifth and final breakout. I shouldn't have ended with this one. It's Jameson Williams.
Oh, fun. No, really good player to talk about. Yeah.
He's a true breakout, right? Yes. We have barely seen anything from Jameson Williams over the past 2 years. But we have to, first of all, we have to ignore that rookie season that didn't exist. He was coming off of the injury. He didn't play the majority of the season. Even when they put him in, they were clearly, visibly, significantly limiting him within that offense. So to me, when I look at him, I just completely push that away in terms of my analysis on him. Looking at last season, I think people kind of underestimate the impact that Josh Reynolds had in that offense. Mm-hmm. He was the wide receiver too.
Yeah.
They utilized him a lot. He had strong touchdowns. His participation was excellent, in super deep leagues where we weren't using him in regular leagues, but in deep leagues, he was a guy that you can put out on a consistent basis. With the exit of Josh Reynolds and Detroit being I love that Detroit gives us so much affirmation as to where they have these players and that they believe in them. And you feel like you can trust Dan Campbell. If he's telling you this is a guy that is going to step up and I like him, he's going to have a breakout. If we're hearing that from him, he's a guy that I trust and I'm leaning into it. So when I look at Jameson Williams stepping into this wide receiver 2 role in the offense and no clear defined wide receiver 3, we're looking at this offense and the potential that Jared Goff has throughout the season with the excellent schedule, the intense amount of dome games, then I just feel like we're going to see a usable wide receiver 2 asset in this offense. And I get the hesitation that people have because we've got Jahmyr Gibbs, we've got David Montgomery, we've got Sam Laporta, Amon-Ra St. Brown. It's a lot, but this is a high-powered offense that we cannot underestimate. And a consistent wide receiver 2 can put up top 24, low-end top 24 value if he's able to step into that role and really earn it and earn those targets and earn those trusts. So I get the hesitation here, but the good thing is his ADP isn't super aggressive. I don't feel like we have to reach on him. And the breakout potential is truly there. This is a former first-round pick. This was a guy that had that massive upside. And I think this year is where he can finally lean into it.
This is one of the weirdest starts to a career that we've seen in a while. I certainly agree with that. I want to compliment, first of all, like the fantasy industry generally for not going crazy with Jameson because I thought it was going to happen. Mm-hmm. I thought we were going to like revisit the Gabe Davis wars from a few years ago where like the last taste that we got from that player was, this sensational supernova game that was unlike anything that we'd previously seen, right? Like the last bit that we got from Jameson was a spectacular game in the postseason. And I just thought we were going to go through the same thing again. And everybody was going to be like, oh yeah, that one game, that's who he is now. That's who he is going forward. And I think people have been a little bit more disciplined than that, which is good. Here's my question for you on Jameson, and is one of the stumbling blocks for me when I try to rank him is I love this offense, and I absolutely think the Lions can average, this is a team that could average 30, 31 points. It wouldn't surprise anyone. Jared Goff over the course of his career has not been hey, let's take shots. Jared Goff is probably not going downfield like a dozen times a game, right? We're going to get a handful of shots to Jameson. He's good enough to get free. He's good enough to convert some of those. How do you think he pairs with his quarterback? But an acceptable answer could be that's not the only way that they're going to use him, because it's not how he was scoring in the playoffs last year, right? Like they were scheming some stuff up for him that was really fun.
Yeah, you did it for me. That's it. I don't think that, that rookie season when he was finally used, all we saw was him going deep and that was it. Mm-hmm. Towards the end of last season, they did such a better job at having more varied usage of him. Everything wasn't so deep. And I think, Jared Goff, how many times is he going to air it out? Not as often as we would love, but I think that intermediate game is really going to pick up for Jameson Williams, and they're going to increase that creativity with him, and there's where the value adds.
Okay, you cruelly stole Tyjae Spears from me, so I'm gonna pivot here, and I'm gonna give you a fifth name, and this is absolute recency bias for me. I'm guilty of it often, and it's about to happen, but I can't let myself not discuss a bear on this podcast, and I'm going to give you Rome Odunze. I wasn't originally going to talk about a rookie, but hey, you threw out Brian Thomas, so I'm going to throw out Rome Odunze. I think it is meaningful that every time something breaks, and this is preseason, we've only seen glimpses of Caleb Williams, and we've only seen glimpses of this Bears offense. But man, when things break down and it's an improv situation, Caleb is looking for Rome. Again, we're not talking about a whole lot of series here, but those two have been inseparable since drafted, right? Like they were, people remember the whole Caleb gushing over the fact that Rome was on his flight going to the draft, right? Like these two have been connected for a while. Every time one of them makes an appearance in Chicago, the other one is with him. They are a thing. Rome Odunze was great last year, and everybody's got him as like the third or fourth rookie receiver. I understand that it's not as clear a path to a huge target total. It's not as clear as it is for Malik Neighbors. It's certainly not as clear as it is for Marvin Harrison Jr. I think there is a non-trivial chance that almost immediately Rome Odunze is actually the best wide receiver on the Bears. That is consistent with what he did as a collegiate player. That would not be shocking to me. I think the world of DJ Moore. Like DJ Moore is coming off a heroic season, and prior to that, DJ Moore, faced with some of the worst quarterback situations that we have seen either in college or in the NFL, still managed to be an 1,100-yard receiver and was great. So this is no disrespect to DJ Moore. I just think there's a real chance that Rome Odunze turns out to be like one of those dudes. and we're kind of sleeping on it.
This one is tough for me. I still can't believe that that Atlanta allowed Chicago to get Roma Odunze.
Same. Yeah, wild pick.
I didn't imagine that was going to happen. This one is tough for me because if there's a receiver that I have been ride or die for his entire NFL career, it's Keenan Allen. I've been so ride or die Keenan Allen. Just never avoid him. Always.
Well, now there's more of him to love.
Right,
apparently
exactly.
now.
Yeah, a little bit more. A little bit. That's okay. I love all the Keenan Allen. But I've never once in my fantasy career leaned away from Keenan Allen. Always recommended was just the most aggressive vigor ever. Yeah. And this is the first year where I'm just like, oh, man, I don't know. It makes me a little bit uncomfortable, and Rome Odunze is a big part of that. It's difficult to trust exactly what Caleb Williams is going to do because he's not a one-trick pony. He can literally do anything. If they, the way that they utilize those receivers, he can make any one of them the wide receiver one of that team. It's just the talent and the connection that you mentioned there. And then when he's scrambling, you do see him just automatically looking for Rome Odunze. So I agree with you on that. I get worried. I don't think it's going to be a Jackson Smith and Jigma type of situation.
Yeah.
And the ADP is not super aggressive or anything, so I don't think we have to worry about it. I think he could break out. I do. It's tough, but I do think that he could end up being that guy.
I will say the tough thing here about the ADP, it's not quite where Thomas is, right? Like there is a real opportunity cost if you take a deal. Like there is also a path for Rome Odunze to be the very clear third option in that passing game tied to a rookie quarterback. And I'm asking a lot of Caleb Williams if I'm asking him to keep like 3 receivers fantasy relevant for the full season. I get that. And there is a real possibility that Rome is the number 3. And he's one of those guys that like maybe the year-end numbers end up just fine. And maybe he ends up with 880 yards, 900 yards, but they, huge percentage of it is in like 2 or 3 games and you don't know when to start him. He could definitely be one of those guys. There's also a path for him to be like a 1,250 receiving yards guy. And he's just exactly the player that he was at the college level. And it translates immediately in the NFL. And I think it's out there. But again, as you say, it's not like the guys that go in his neighborhood in drafts are some real players who are going to see real volume. Like he doesn't go that far beyond like Deontay Johnson and that type where I know the numbers are going to be fine as long as they stay healthy. There's a lot more variance to Odunze. I just think the ceiling might be a little bit higher. All right, we're going to take one more break. And when we return from that break, we're going to crack open the mailbag, take a few of your questions. All right, welcome back. We know for everyone listening to this podcast that you are likely to have the most important drafts in your fantasy life coming up in the next few weeks, so we are here to help. Welcome to the Fantasy Mailbag.
You've got mail.
When it comes, I want to
Goodbye.
First question I'm going to take. I love this because it is going to force Tera Roberts to take a player that she just hyped and put him into very specific context within a draft. This is coming from Kyle. Kyle asks, I'm in a keeper league that allows 2 keepers. Lots of wide receivers are being kept in a 12-person league. Long story short, by pick number 7, I will need a wide receiver. Kyle speculates that the receivers likely to be there at pick 7 after the kept players are A.J. Brown, Marvin Harrison Jr., Devontae Adams, and Drake London. We know you like Drake London as a potential top 5 fantasy receiver, breakout player. Kyle says, my main question is, would it be crazy to pick London above A.J. Brown at pick 7?
It's not crazy, Kyle, but here's the thing. I love Drake London. I do. But comparing him to A.J. Brown, who is a player who has been one of the more consistent receivers throughout his, not only throughout his career, but specifically with Philadelphia. Yeah. He has had just such a level of consistency and reliability. And does he have that overall wide receiver one upside of ideal situation, Justin Jefferson, or Tyreek Hill, or CeeDee Lamb? No, probably not. Just because, again, the offense is you've got so many weapons. You've got the Eagles sitting there doing the tush push. Things are a little bit limited. You've got Devonta Smith. But when I look at A.J. Brown, I know what he's going to do. I know exactly what I'm going to get out of him. There's not an extreme risk. And what I think that ideally, as a Drake London truther, what I think I can get out of Drake London is kind of similar to AJ Brown. So rather than saying I want to get AJ Brown production out of Drake London, I'm just going to take AJ Brown.
Just go ahead and take the real AJ Brown. Yeah, I think that's the right answer here. And I think it's so easy to get caught up in the heavily hyped players, and we're all to some extent believers in Drake London. But like a 97th percentile outcome for Drake London looks exactly like AJ Brown's last 2 seasons, which have been the same damn season. They've been like he's pushing 1,500 yards each year. He's scoring touchdowns for you each year. Like that is a dream scenario for Drake London. And like I get it. Like I get having London in that Garrett Wilson range. I get having him like whatever. He's wide receiver 12, 13, 14, fine. I don't think he belongs in the conversation with AJ Brown just yet. And we can feel all kinds of different ways about Philadelphia's offense and exactly what it's going to be this year. But he has just dropped 2 of basically the same season in a row, and they have been at the highest level. So if Drake London can do that, we're going to have a very different conversation about him next year, and he's going to acquire new coordinates on the old draft grid, but he's not there yet.
Exactly.
How do you, just a knee-jerk reaction, how do you feel about Drake London and some of the other names that are mentioned here? How do you feel about him specifically with Marvin Harrison Jr.? We haven't discussed him yet.
That one is one where I go back and forth on that one because I love Kyler Murray, and seeing Kyler Murray. We have not seen him with a Marvin Harrison Jr.
Yeah.
We haven't seen him. We got like 1 season of him with an elite level DeAndre Hopkins, and that was it. And in that season, he was, QB3. He was fantastic. I think that Marvin Harrison Jr. can put up those top 5 numbers in his rookie season. At the same time, I feel like you do want to exercise a little bit of caution. And while I don't have an issue with it, they're just so close for me and kind of have the same risk level of unknown factor to them. So with that said, I'm okay with Drake London over Marvin Harrison Jr. just because we have seen Drake London in the league and we know that all he needs is a quarterback to get to that level. There's still a little bit of mystery around this Arizona offense, the play calling. There's still some things we kind of have to work out and get comfortable with. How's Trey McBride fitting in there in terms of the target share and whatnot? So, yeah, I'm okay with leaning towards London over Marvin Harrison.
Yeah, I think those two are really close. And they're both, it's weird in London's case because he's been in the league. We've seen what Drake London looks like, but he's still kind of a thrill of the unknown guy because the quarterback situation was so bad. And you have to tell yourself a story about what it can look like with a real adult, fully functional NFL quarterback, right? So for me, I lean Marvin, but they're close to back to back. And I think that's a much tougher call. But to Kyle's predicament, if AJ Brown is there, I am definitely taking AJ Brown. And I'm not thinking about these other
100.
guys in reference to him. One more question before we get out of here. I like this one too. We're going to go to Eric. I like this one because this is the rare question that comes into the mailbag that doesn't even really have player names attached. It's more philosophy, and those are always fun. Eric asks, I find myself really liking the QB tight end stack, McBride, Kyler specifically. But what if one of the top 4 quarterbacks is going later than ADP, like in the 4th or 5th round? Would you take the value at QB, even if it means you might not be able to stack? There's a lot going on here. And so I don't know exactly what Eric's league is, but let's assume this is just a standard 12-person redraft league. How important is it to you to pair, whether it's receiver with quarterback or tight end with quarterback? I mean, that is obviously a very common big contest strategy. And you can sort of, if you feel really good about one, then the other is gonna thrive, obviously. How often do you care about it in redraft leagues?
In redraft leagues, I don't really aggressively lean into it. It's more of a fun. It's a thrill kind of thing. Yeah. If you can get it and it happens, it's something to look forward to. If you can get that Kyler Murray stack with Marvin Harrison Jr. or Trey McBride. But I don't I don't let it affect me reaching on somebody, overdrafting, or feeling like I can't take best value at a position because I'm actively trying to seek out the stack. Tight end stacks are interesting with quarterbacks because it's easier to achieve. A lot of times when you have these top guys, their receivers are going fairly similar in ADP, so it's difficult to kind of be able to make that stack. So I get it because the tight ends are more achievable. So you get that the thrill of the stack without having to aggressively reach on some guys. But if you can do it, yeah. But I don't lean into it in redraft.
Yeah, I feel like the one that you can't get, like Mahomes and Kelsey are going to go in close vicinity, right? So you probably, unless you're at a turn and they both fall, you're probably not going to get those two. I feel like the scenario that Eric might be describing here, like, I don't know, sometimes Mark Andrews will go before Lamar Jackson, I suppose, and you can't, like, if Lamar falls and you have an opportunity there, I would go ahead and take Lamar. Like, he's, I think he's a top 4 fantasy quarterback. So this all depends on the names, but I'm not so tied to the idea of pairing these guys that I absolutely have to do it in every draft. That said, I find the Murray McBride pairing super achievable. Like, that's really easy to do. They because Kyler falls, in my mind, Kyler can be the overall tight end one. I think he's like the end of the list of guys who can plausibly be the overall tight end one. He's been close before. If he just stays healthy, if we just get the sort of rushing season that I think we can reasonably expect, we get a huge year out of Kyler. But he doesn't go in the range of the other top 4, top 5 quarterbacks. So we can pair him with McBride. We can also pair Kincaid with, I hyped up Dalton Kincaid. We can pair him with Josh Allen pretty easily. Allen goes like round 3. Kincaid is going to go 3-4 rounds later. It's fine. You can tie those two together. So I don't hate the idea of doing it, but I wouldn't build my entire approach to a draft around it. Again, it's a big contest strategy more than it's a redraft strategy. But I don't hate where your head is here. And I think, like, this is also one of those questioners that's kind of answering. You're kind of answering the question in the question, right? Like, if one of the top 4 quarterbacks falls, I'm probably going to jump on it. And that's not how I approached the position, 10 years ago. But one of the points that we make occasionally on this podcast is, like, in the last 5 or 6 years, basically since the Patrick Mahomes 5,000-yard season, the first 5,000-yard season, we've seen some of the highest scoring quarterback seasons in fantasy history. Like, it was Mahomes and then it was Lamar. It's Josh Allen every year apparently, and Mahomes did it again. And, like, we're seeing a bunch of seasons that are like break the game kind of QB seasons that did not used to occur, like in the early days of fantasy, right? We just, when late round QB was a strategy, it was because no quarterback ever carried you to fantasy titles. And that has very much changed. So if Lamar is there for me late, if Mahomes is there for me later than he ought to be, I probably go that route.
I agree.
All right. Just as a reminder, the fantasy mailbag going to be open for business the rest of August. You can tweet at, please don't tweet at me, tweet at Yahoo Sports, tweet at anybody but me. It's fine. You can tweet at me. I'll be sure to tweet out the beginning of each week. Matt Harmon will do the same. But you can get bumped to the front of the mailbag line by submitting your questions via voice memo or video. We're begging for your voice memos or video to fantasymailbag@yahoosports.com. All right, that is going to do it for us today on Thursday. Convictions Week continues with Sal Vetri joining the podcast to talk about some sleepers. Until then, we are out.